Here in downtown Santa Barbara, I'm joined with Jayla Siciliano from Bon Affair, and it is a great privilege for me to interview her and talk about the story of Bon Affair and how it was incepted. So Jayla, thank you so much for being here. We're going to cover a lot. We're going to cover your story and books, routines, lessons you've learned along the way. So, Jayla, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me, and happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is my birthday today. I am turning 23. Not a huge deal. I'd rather be spending time working, doing this today. So, let's get started with the Bon Affair story. Can you take us back to when the idea was first instilled in you to start this wine spritzer company?
Definitely. So it's funny because I lived here in Santa Barbara for about 10 years, and I've been gone for 10 years and just moved back here. And being back here, driving around actually reminds me of when this kind of all started. Right out of college, I worked at Diesel Footwear, a company here in Santa Barbara. And I was a product developer, and everything revolved around alcohol and drinking. And at the same time, I've always been really active and healthy, and I was teaching kickboxing down at Martial Arts Family Fitness, doing outrigger, hiking, just anything active and outdoors. And I've always eaten really healthy and been into nutrition and stuff like that. So as I started working in this industry that was completely dominated by alcohol and drinking, and I love to have fun and I love drinking, don't get me wrong, I found that as I got older, I couldn't really go out, have a few glasses of wine, and wake up and teach kickboxing at 6:30. And I'm not a big beer drinker. I like the taste of beer, but I get full and tired. And so I literally started, we'd have barbecues at my house or something, and I'd start pouring soda water in my wine. And then a bunch of my friends here, they'd be like, oh yeah, let's make wine spritzers. And because we could sip on that all night, and not feel bad in the morning and get a buzz, but not go, kind of over the top. And then I moved to Burlington, Vermont to work at Burton Snowboards. And the whole drinking escalated even higher. It was a very much kind of a male-dominated, everybody taking shots, drinking heavily. And same thing as, I was getting even older and I'm going, I cannot drink like this anymore. And so I started, a bunch of my friends there. It was the big joke. Here comes Jayla with her wine spritzers. I spent a lot of time on boats. And at the end of one summer, a bunch of my really athletic guy friends were going, hey, can I get one of those? Because they didn't want to drink beer all afternoon on the boat and get full and tired either. And that's when I kind of really realized that this is a void in the market. You had the whole wine cooler category of the 80s, but nobody's really evolved it to make it healthy and applicable to the health conscious kind of consumers out there and using a good quality wine. And at the same time, I was getting burnt out of my job, and I thought it'd be super easy. So I quit my job to start it. So that's kind of how it all started.
Wow. And you mentioned that this is a healthy alternative. I'm curious as to what your relationship with alcohol is. Some people, don't drink alcohol because they don't think it's healthy, because they have hangovers in the morning. I personally lean on that side. My, experience is that I get hangovers in the morning. But this is different. And how is it? What about it is healthy?
It's lower in alcohol, so it's 6.5% compared to regular wine that can be 12 to 15%. And it has zero sugar in it. I've witnessed there's a lot of sparkling wine companies out there, or there's maybe not a lot, but there are wine companies out there that put high fructose corn syrup and all kinds of ingredients in there, and they don't have to list it on the bottle because alcohol laws state you don't have to put a nutritional panel on there. So we're fully transparent. There's no sugar in the product. And, it's just kind of a lighter, healthier option. So in terms of how I view alcohol, to me, alcohol is, drinking a glass of wine signals I'm not working, I'm having fun, I'm relaxing. but being very conscious of what I put in my body and my liver and how much sugar I, take in. I see this as a healthier option because I can kind of have my cake and eat it too. I can have a few glasses and not feel guilty about it and still not feel bad and hungover in the morning. Although I always say if you drink enough of anything, you'll feel it in the morning. But I can drink, 3-4 glasses of this and it's equivalent to 2 glasses of regular wine. So I guess that's kind of why. But yeah, we have to be careful with the word healthy, but it's still alcohol. It's not healthy, but it's a lighter option.
Right. Okay. Now, take us back to when you were working at Diesel, and I think there was another company, Burton, mm-hmm. and you were designing for 7 years or something. How did that design experience get you into designing a whole entire new brand? So what were you doing as brand manager and developer that kind of led into this new product?
Well, I think my experience in product development, in particular, I was spending a lot of time in Asia, at least a couple months a year. And every trip to Asia was basically all about where there's a will, there's a way. I went over there to work with the factories. And if there was something we couldn't figure out how to do from here, I went over there and that was our goal, was let's just find a way to make this, crazy high heel or develop this new leather. Or at Burton, it was, a new board bag or something like that. And so I really learned that idea of, where there's a will, there's a way. You can figure it out. That's what product development is. And then I think in terms of design influence, I saw starting this, a lot of the alcohol companies, or especially the lighter alcohol brands out there, if the bigger companies are trying to target women, a lot of times they just slap a pink bow on it and say, this is for women, that kind of thing. And I pretty much dress, in black and white every day. I'm not a big pink person. And my thought process was just because, it's primarily for women doesn't mean it has to be all frilly with bows on it and, pink. And so I like, kind of minimal design. And so I think a lot of that kind of ended up translating over to the packaging and really doing something that's targeted towards women, but not alienating men. That was my goal. I wanted it to be something, a guy and a girl could share a bottle if they wanted to, and the guy wouldn't feel like, oh, I'm not touching that stuff. So I think, it was really that product development background and experience working in Asia and figuring things out, as well as being exposed to, all kinds of different materials and pushing the limits on, materials and design and doing stuff that's different outside of the box.
One of your taglines is Vice meets virtue, where vice meets virtue. Explain to us what does that mean? Because when I think about that, I think about yin yang, how there's like, I don't know, vice is the dark, virtue is the white, and there's like a little bit of each in each one. What does that mean to you? Why did you choose that tagline?
So the tagline is really the good and the bad. I think everybody likes to have their vices, but everybody's also trying to do the right thing and be good also. And I see Bonafere as a way to kind of do both. And so vice meets virtue. It's the two, the good and the bad, kind of, as one in the bottle together. Okay.
What are some of your vices?
Oh, lately, unfortunately, all I do is work. No, I guess I love, wine is definitely one of my vices. The Food Network is probably another one. I could totally veg out and watch a few hours of the Food Network. And I guess that's really it. I don't honestly.
The Food Network is your vice? Oh, man.
Well, guilty TV pleasure, I guess
guilty
I could say.
TV pleasure.
Does that count as a vice, maybe? I don't know.
I think so.
Does it? Okay.
I think it could.
And then in terms of, maybe food, chocolate, I guess. I love chocolate. Dark chocolate.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I want to ask you a kind of a technical alcohol industry question. I know a guy who's starting a Jello shot company, and he's told me that there are 3 separate levels that he's trying to market to, starting with the distributor, and then the retailer, and then the consumer. And to him, his relationship with the distributor is most important. because everything flows down into the consumer. Now, it looks like you're selling directly to the consumer as well. What has been your experience with that, and maybe any tips that you've learned from marketing down that way?
For me, the most important is the end consumer. It's funny because when I first started this, I thought, oh, this is different, unique. There's nothing else like it on the market. That'll make it a lot easier. And what I found, a lot of these distributors and even retailers, they're very set in their ways. They're kind of, not all of them. There are some who are really thinking outside the box, but the majority of them are kind of old school, for lack of a better word. They're used to wine categories being a certain way. There's a certain price point associated with a certain product. It goes in a certain place in the shelf. And what I've found is that it's tough to get the distributors and the retailers, some of them, to buy into what we're doing, that there are people out there who would want a lighter alcohol option. They're just not used to that. No one's, really doing that, even though the light beer category is massive. And for the exact reason that this light beer is started as session beer. So guys could sit there and have 6 of them, and not be falling off the bar stool kind of thing. And so this is technically a session wine, but for some reason it's tough with some of the distributors and retailers to get that point across. But our end consumer fully understands the need for it. And, really the distributors, there's different types of distributors. I have some that are great, and I have some that are the big guys that are very difficult to work with. But either way, whether it's with the small distributor or the big distributor, my whole focus is on the end consumer. I work closely with the distributor and closely with the retailers, but our whole marketing strategy is to educate consumers outside the store through, fitness events, spas, salons, stuff like that isn't usually where the alcohol companies, wine companies are marketing, and then drive all of our traffic into the retailer. So we're more focused on kind of pulling it off the shelf by marketing to the end consumer than pushing it off the shelf through the distributor. And there's a million different ways you can go about it. A lot of it depends on how much money you have. It can get very expensive trying to incentivize. How much money do we have? Trying to incentivize the distributors can get really expensive. So we do a lot of kind of grassroots organic marketing to the end consumer.
Okay. That's great stuff. I want to talk about Shark Tank, because I think this show plays a critical role in your story, and I know some guys, Hamboards, who, when I was living in Orange County, I was acquainted with them. Gus, we would get dinner together, and it's very cool to see how Shark Tank has magnified their company, and they've grown, I think it was like 400% or something. So take us back to Shark Tank, and I know you've spoken on a lot of different interviews about it, but and specifically Mark Cuban, because he was the one who funded you, and if there are other interviews I've seen that you've covered, what it's like to be on the show and stuff. But how has, post-show been in your relationship with Mark Cuban and giving you advice, and what things would you draw away from that?
Well, the show overall, I have nothing but positive things to say about it. After going through the process, it's actually a very authentic show. The sharks know nothing about you before you get on there. So I think it's an amazing platform, and I'm so thankful. I have so much gratitude for even getting the opportunity to get on there. And then getting the deal with Mark Cuban on top of it was, incredible. And it's funny because when you start to, you're all excited about working with someone like Mark Cuban, and then you go, oh my God, this guy is like going to have high expectations. Like this is an intense person to work for and work with, partner with. But what I've found is, he's I think he's a really great guy. I think he's really in it to help the entrepreneurs out. Basically, so it's been almost a year and a half, I think, since Shark Tank aired. And yeah, we, skyrocketed after the show aired. Our online sales, they've stayed steady. But so basically, working with Mark has been, I send him a weekly update every week. He responds within hours, which is incredible. I always put the bad stuff first, the good stuff last. And you never have to guess what he's thinking. He's very blunt and, honest. And I am partnered with him because I think he knows what he's doing. So I take his advice very seriously. And I apply it to what we're doing. And he also has a team of people who are dedicated to all of his companies. They do all of our finances for free, a lot with our website, business development. They just got us into the American Airlines Stadium in Dallas. So it's been a huge plus. It was so worth that 35% that I gave up.
Right. So he owns 35%. When I go to your Twitter, it says Bonafare, a Mark Cuban company. Is this a Mark Cuban company or a Jayla Siciliano company? Because you own most of it. Mm-hmm. So what about that?
I think, it's one of those things. Part of the reason why you give up a lot of equity on Shark Tank is because these investors are in the public eye. And I think it adds credibility. So I would say it's obviously it's my company, and Mark says that all the time. He gives advice and he says, but it's your company ultimately, so you make the decision. But it is a heavily influenced Mark Cuban company. I mean, he's very involved. His team is very involved. And I think it helps validate, our place in the market to use his name wherever we can. And he's okay with us doing that. So we had it in there. But yeah, I guess we could. It would just get very long if we said it's a Jayla Siciliano Mark Cuban company.
Well, or you could add, as seen on Shark Tank.
Yeah, we have that too.
I like it. I think it's very cool watching all this happen. I know Hamboards has done really well. The show has put them on the map, and they've grown exponentially. So kudos to them. It's amazing what shows can do.
It's insane.
Yeah. So now I want to talk about kind of personal beliefs and mantras and learn more about you. When I say successful, who comes to mind and why?
Well, I guess, because I've been working so much with Mark Cuban, and I think he's an obvious one that's kind of in my face all the time, but I wouldn't necessarily say I think of him, obviously he's made a lot of money, but I see him as successful because I think he stayed true to who he is, even with making all that money. He's not afraid to speak his mind and to be honest and blunt despite what people think of him. And I think that's pretty amazing. I think that's, whether you agree with him or not, it's pretty awesome that he has made all that money and he's, willing to stay true to himself like that. And then I think, I see someone like my husband as successful. He has his own business. He's in sales, but he is really good at staying balanced. He's very creative. And he always inspires me to make sure, I'm still exercising and doing things that are fun and creative and living a balanced life. So I mean, ultimately I see success as, working in whatever you're passionate about and living a balanced lifestyle.
Talk to us about family life. You're married to your husband. How long has that been? You have family in San Diego? Or explain to us what family life looks like.
So I grew up in New Hampshire, and my parents still live there. My sister lives in San Francisco. My brother lives back in Burlington, Vermont. He works at Burton now. And we were in San Diego, and my husband's family is kind of Orange County area, but we didn't really want to live there either. Just the traffic. We're both kind of more small town people. And we're both turning 38 this year.
Wow.
Yep. So we're...
I can't believe it.
So we're trying...
You're not 38.
Really? Yeah,
no,
I swear. But I appreciate that. So yeah, I think we keep joking that we want to have a family, but we don't want to have babies.
Why not?
It's just a lot of work, and we really like our life the way it is right now. So I think it's probably on the horizon here in the next couple of years, though. We've got to figure that out here soon, but we've put it off for a while just because it's daunting. On top of managing a company and growing a company, this is 100% kind of my priority.
Right.
But my husband and I still spend a ton of time together, and he's been my biggest supporter throughout this whole thing. I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. So
Very cool. How long have you been married?
we've been married over 3 years, 3.5 years.
Okay. Wow. I still can't believe you're 38. What is your first 60 to 120 minutes of your morning look like? In other words, morning routine, but also, a day in the life of a Bonafere owner. What does that look like on a daily basis?
So I usually wake up about 5:30 or 6, and I'm a morning person, so I typically am on the computer about half an hour later. I kind of wake up, make breakfast, something healthy, and then, I will power out 8 to 10 hours of work, run to meetings, I try to get all my kind of important stuff done in the mornings. And then, in meetings or traveling a lot, and then usually pretty much always have dinner. My husband and I both love to cook. He cooks lately more than I do. But
what does he cook?
He loves to grill, or, we both eat pretty healthy. So, I don't know. He's a great cook. It's funny.
Steak or?
Anything, chicken, fish, seafood. He'll make pasta, homemade pasta. I mean, he gets crazy. He makes his own chili oils and all kinds of stuff. So, and then it's usually exercise of some sort. I've been doing a lot of yoga the last couple of years. It keeps me grounded and sane.
Okay.
And I'm actually going to start teaching kickboxing again down here.
Really?
Yeah,
Why is that?
So it'll be fun. I just love doing it. It's fun. It's really cool to help people, in fitness. And I love the owners of the studio down there. I think it's one of the best places.
What studio is it?
Martial Arts Family Fitness.
Okay.
So I actually started teaching there and started doing martial arts there. And I got a belt away from my black belt, and then I moved. So that's on my list to get now that I've moved back here as well. And then go to bed usually around, I'm back on email before I go to bed, and then go to bed around 10 or 11 o'clock. And I definitely need my sleep. I can't do the 3 or 4 hours a night of sleep. So
How often do you sleep, or what are your hours?
I usually sleep, I'd say I try to get at least 2 to 3 nights a week of around 8 hours, then 6 to 7 the rest of the week.
Okay. That's great. I recently joined, I don't know if you know, Bar Fitness.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it sits on De La Guerra and Chapala. Every time I walk by there every day, and there's just very fine feline specimens working out, and I thought I'd had to try it. I'm trying to get out with this girl, Michaela, I've invited. But anyway, back to your business. What has been the most challenging aspect of it? I know we've been in a coffee entrepreneur meeting, and you've talked about every dollar that you receive or a dollar that you spend has a little GPS tracking on it. I like that, and you can maybe explain more on that. But what has been really challenging in getting this going?
Oh, where do I start? I think that, raising the first round of funding was extremely challenging. There were many times I thought, am I really going to get this funding? It took me a year and a half of pitching investors to raise $450,000. And looking back, without, I didn't have a single sale. I didn't even have a full product developed. So that was obviously very challenging. Once I got that money, we ran into severe production issues in the beginning, which I mentioned on Shark Tank. Mm-hmm. And that was devastating. That was actually very depressing. That's when I started doing yoga, because I got high blood pressure, and I was like, this is not healthy. I'm so stressed. Mm. These people give you their money, they believe in you, and then, it wasn't my fault, the production issues. It was a family-run bottler. They worked for a lot of the big brands out there. They bottled for a lot of big companies. But they were out of business 6 months after we had those issues. So we just kind of got caught in their downward spiral. So that was very, very difficult. And to get through it, I read a lot of books. I started meditating, doing yoga.
What did you read?
A lot of just business books, a lot of, personal development books, just trying to stay positive and focus on the end goal. Is specific books are you looking for?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. I think The Compound Effect is one that I love. That idea of just kind of persistence of doing small things over time is really what adds up. And I kind of just, thought I just have to keep going. I just have to figure this out. I just have to, plow through this and make it happen. And so that was obviously very, very challenging. And then, obviously being in Shark Tank for an hour, that was brutal in itself, but
I was
that
going
was
to
fun.
ask about that. Is you were in there an hour, but they only kept 10 minutes. What happened in those other 50 minutes that was going on?
They don't cut at all. So it was all very, it was an hour long of them taping straight through. It was pretty much just more of what they, showed, more questions, but everything they edited was very true to the sequence of the questions and the answers and everything. But yeah, there's no cutting. So if you start crying or you pee your pants, they're going to keep going with
Right,
it.
like this show.
Yeah.
So if you pee your pants, I can't help you there.
I promise I won't do that.
All right. All right, let's talk more about emotions and maybe anger. When I say punchable, who comes to mind and why?
Punchable. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the kickboxing studio, because there's a lot of punching bags down there, I guess. A person you're looking for?
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes I do want to just the alcohol industry and the food industry as a whole. I get really frustrated with our food industry and the lack of transparency, and that really gets my blood boiling. I get really frustrated with how much deception there is in our food industry, and I think that's something that could be described as punchable. It's extremely frustrating that there's companies out there putting ingredients in their products. They don't have to list it on the label. The ways companies are marketing products as, being healthy and being good for you when they're really not. I just think it's horrible. I think it's really bad. So.
Now, I've noticed you mentioned in your product descriptions the word seductive or seduction. Yeah, I don't know
Really?
if you wrote your own product description or what, but what role does seduction play in Bon Affair? What would you say about that?
Well, I think the part you're talking about is in our description of our Syrah, our sparkling Syrah. We say that this product seduces forest animals. And
What do you mean by that?
well, it's a wine spritzer, right? So we don't take it that seriously. It's not a fine wine. Our tasting notes are, it's happy hour in your mouth, bubbles spark your palate. If Sauvignon Blanc and purified sparkling water had a wild love weekend, this is what you would get.
Oh.
So, I don't think seduction really plays a part. It's more just having fun with it and kind of joking around. The name is really just, the good and bad of the affair in the bottle. And so sometimes we play around with that and poke fun at ourselves.
Okay. So you talk about having fun and stuff. What do, you and your husband maybe, or things to relax? Where do you go? What activities do you partake in to, have fun or relax?
Mostly it just is getting together with friends and cooking is really what we love to do. Going to the beach, hiking. So one of the main reasons I'm happy to be back in Santa Barbara. There's so much hiking so close by. We love actually playing cards. My husband and I play cribbage, or we'll kick back, on a Sunday afternoon in the yard with a glass of wine and play cards and just hang out. So it's really just cooking, hanging with friends, and being outdoors.
All right. Cooking and cards. Something we should check out. Now, we were talking offline a little bit about your move to Santa Barbara full time, coming from San Diego, and I was wondering if you could explain why Santa Barbara. Why do you see it as a important location to headquarter or, make decisions for Bonafere?
Well, we recently started distributing throughout California into Northern California and all the Whole Foods up there. And our bottlers up in Northern California, our fulfillment centers in Paso Robles. So I've been spending a lot of time in Northern California and Central California. So that was kind of one of the main reasons I was like, okay, it would make sense for us to be closer up there for how much I was traveling up there and everything. And then secondary to that, my husband lived here for 4 years. I had lived here for 10 years, and it's always been a goal of ours to get back here. We just love the small town, community. It's just got such an amazing, community and vibe to the whole place. We love it. So that was our goal.
That's great. We love it too. That's why the show exists. Interview local entrepreneurs, help share stories in a new way. It's the Joe Strandell Show. And I want to talk about books and perhaps what role they've played in your development, and perhaps if you could recommend your favorite book too, or book you gift most often to people, what would that be?
The book I probably have recommended or gift the most often is The Compound Effect that I mentioned before. I think it's very relevant in diet, business, health, relationships. It's just that concept of it's the little things you do every day that add up over time that really kind of get you the end results. And it also applies to kind of my motto in work is patience and persistence. And I think it's a very making progress is a combination of being patient. Stuff doesn't happen overnight, but also being extremely persistent. And I think it's balancing those two. That's kind of what moves things forward. Another book that I constantly, refer back to is the E-Myth Mastery. Especially at this stage in the business, it's very easy for me to work in the day-to-day and to not pull myself back and look at the big picture and focus on the long-term strategy. It's easy to get caught up in the little things and invoicing and, all these little day-to-day things where even though we have employees, I'm still doing a lot of that stuff. And I have to remind myself to spend, a block of time every day on the big picture stuff. That my job is not only to get the day-to-day done, but to kind of execute the big picture vision of what we're doing. And that book is kind of all about, working on your business and not in your business. So, and then I think I mentioned to you before, just any inspiring books by other entrepreneurs, seeing what other people have done. And the reminder that even, someone like Mark Cuban, another thing that I think is awesome about him is I know he really can relate to where we're at. He went through all this. So it's always inspiring to read about other entrepreneurs and their stories and, what they had to go through to get their companies off the ground.
Wow. I want to go back to a few of the things that you were saying, but balancing persistence and patience, I think that's really good. How do you balance those two things? And specifically relating to the other thing you said with employees, your experience with hiring people and delegating tasks and expecting a certain result. How do you become patient but also persist with the things that you really envision happening for your business?
I think, the persistence part is follow-up. I think a good example is that it took me over a year to get into Whole Foods. I got rejected 2 or 3 times before I got in. And if I hadn't been persistent, in following up and still pushing, even though I got rejected, we probably wouldn't be in there now. And at the same time, if I wasn't patient and just expected it, to happen in the first meeting and then gave up, then I probably wouldn't be in there right now. So I think it's that, day-to-day follow-up is so important. And even, I always say it's not a no, it's just a not right now. And then the patience part is, it's very easy to just, nothing ever seems to happen fast enough. It's a lot of work to, especially in a competitive industry like alcohol. I mean, every industry has its, tough spots, but it's not easy to, grow a brand and a company, and it takes time to do it. And it's not a quick overnight thing. And I think for me, I really love the process of it. And I finally am in a place where I'm actually enjoying, they always say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, but it's taken me a while to get there, but I'm finally at a place where I'm enjoying the process and building the company and appreciate, the little wins along the way, but realizing, I'm not anxious to get to this end result anymore. And I'm just excited to, keep connecting with customers and with people and meeting great new people and just really enjoying the process of building the company.
Yeah. What would be an example of a little win you're talking about?
Getting a new retailer. We just got into Cost Plus World Market in Texas, and that's been about 1.5 years in the works. So it should be hitting the shelves this week, Friday, maybe Monday. So that's a win. I think another win can just be something simple like, a big influencer posting our bottle when we didn't ask them to, and that's exciting.
That happened?
Yeah, that happens.
Who was it?
Fairly often. There's this girl, Rocky in San Diego. She's a big blogger, model, and she happens to love Bon Affair, and so that's exciting when we see people like her who get excited about it. And normally she gets paid by companies to do stuff, and so those are fun little, just internally we're like, yay, that's awesome.
Yeah. No, I love that. And we were also talking offline about your ambassador program for people who are interested in displaying it on their social media. I think you were saying, you have like 6 people. That's something I'm kind of interested in. What maybe have you learned from that, and have you seen other people do that inspired you to do that? What's been the big takeaways from influencer programs?
Well, while I worked at Burton, they had, their team of riders. And those are the people who are really out there using their equipment every day, snowboarding, living that life, living and breathing snowboarding. And, they bring those people on board because they want those people to represent Burton and to, incorporate that into their lifestyle. And I think that nowadays, especially, people don't want to watch ads on TV, and they don't really believe, what companies are putting in ads. And a lot of that marketing, again, goes back to transparency, and it's not always believable. You kind of take it with a grain of salt. But when somebody who lives and breathes, health and fitness and having fun, and they authentically like a product and want to be a part of that company growing, I think that's the best marketing that you can get. So with our brand ambassador program, we've had a lot of people, and we're really looking for the people who are truly passionate about what we're doing. And we want to incorporate them, into the company, decisions of new products going forward, and get their feedback, and, genuinely get their feedback and incorporate their ideas into what we're doing. And it's just cool that they want to be a part of it. So it's exciting.
Wow. That's awesome. I want to talk about you're 38, which is unbelievable. I don't believe it for a second. What would you tell 22-year-old self, knowing what you know now? Maybe, where were you at that time? And what advice or tips would you give to that person from back then?
Gosh. Okay. So when I was 22, I was just graduating college. I had studied abroad in Costa Rica for a year, and I majored in global studies. And global studies was all about kind of nonprofits, and I fully thought I was all about save the world, go work for a nonprofit. And I ended up getting this job at Diesel 8 months out of college. And then I found myself over in Asia working in these, factories, which is the polar opposite of what I thought I was going to do. I'd always been sewing as a hobby, and that's kind of how I ended up getting the job through a friend at Diesel. So when I was 22, gosh, I don't even know, where I was at. But the one thing I would tell myself is to focus on building my network. I didn't really learn that until I started this business, the power of networking and maintaining contacts and a network and finding mentors and advisors early, I think, could have really helped me quite a bit, especially within the companies that I was working. Asking some of the higher ups for their advice or building relationships with them, I think is really, really powerful. And I didn't fully understand what that was. So that's probably something I would tell myself is go back, be conscious of building a network and finding mentors and advisors.
And so for those who maybe don't know about that business or, are curious about growing, what maybe a few things could you say about finding mentors and growing your network? Also, though, what role have mentors played in your life personally as you've developed?
I think I've had a lot of, at this point, different mentors and advisors, and each kind of for different areas of whatever I'm doing. During the fundraising stage, I had people who, have raised money before, who really took me under their wing to help me kind of work through a lot of the terms and the paperwork. And without them to bounce a lot of that information off, I could have made some major mistakes in terms of, the terms with the investors that I had. So I think that's one area that was very helpful. Some of my investors I definitely see as mentors at this point. They're incredible business people. I have a woman, Carrie Anderson, amazing businesswoman. And I still look to them just for advice. A lot of times, when you just get stuck and you don't know what to do, having somebody who's kind of been there, has a lot of experience, just asking their advice, getting their feedback. And then I think just listening, when they have stuff to say. And I think the best advice for getting mentors and advisors is just networking. There's no real formula for it. Just go to every possible event out there and say hi to people. It has to be natural. I think a lot of the networking events, I hate the word networking. It sounds annoying. But it can be as simple as just, just sparking up a conversation, with people at a happy hour or something. And I think asking people a lot of questions is the best way to get to know people and find out, if there's somebody you might be able to work with down the road.
What networking events do you attend?
Have you attended? Yeah, I just got back here a month ago, but while I was in San Diego, I volunteered with an organization called San Diego Sports Initiative, and they were they were a group that was a lot of entrepreneurs that helped companies kind of put together their pitch deck, and they were a great organization. They were part of a bigger organization called Connect. So I started working with them, and I went to a lot of their events, and I always met great new people, and a lot of the people that I work with and people that I've hired have been through, people that I've met at different events. So I think equally, if it's someone who is looking to work with a startup, especially in today's kind of job market, going to events, putting yourself out there, and just talking to people is really powerful. So I think any event, but you got to be careful. There's some that are, I don't know, a little cheesier than others.
A little shady,
yeah.
Maybe? Okay. So this brings up kind of a new idea, but when we went to that coffee meeting, I asked you about women entrepreneurship, and there's a good book that I'm just kind of getting into, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, and she is raising the flag for the underrepresented group of women entrepreneurs, and I think I even saw something on LinkedIn of underrepresented angel investors who are women. And you're right. I think you mentioned before that it's very heavily dominated by males. How have you seen that dynamic, and how have you navigated through that? And what would you say to aspiring female entrepreneurs who, aspire to do big things in their life?
I just think you got to ignore what everybody says and just go for it. It is very male dominated, especially the investor community. I think there are benefits to being female. You stand out. A lot of times I'll go into a meeting and here I am 5'1" and give my pitch. And, I think sometimes it forces people to stop and go, what is this chick doing? So I think there's benefits to it. I think I don't know, the hard parts are, right now where, in being totally honest, looking at having a family and having kids, one of the reasons, it's not really a reason, but it's definitely crossed my mind, is, will people take me as seriously if I'm a mom and I have kids? And I know that they will, but I can't help but sometimes, will in these investor meetings, will they think my priority is not on my business? So I think that becomes, for some reason, an issue for female entrepreneurs, or maybe it's just me, I don't know. But I think that's kind of a lot of what, in that book she talks about also, is having a family and being a businesswoman, and balancing those two. But for me, it just motivates me more to, grow my business and become one of those angel investors down the road. There are females out there, and I love when I meet them. It's really cool, but it doesn't mean they're going to invest in you just because they're a female. They're smart businesswomen.
You want to be an angel investor?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Why is that?
It'd be awesome to be able to give back. I mean, I've had so many. I feel so fortunate to have gotten, people to invest in me and my business, and I would love to be able to help someone get their business off the ground. I think would be incredible. Would be really fun.
Very cool. I love all this stuff. We'll probably wrap up soon. Every episode is usually 45 minutes to an hour, but we'll wrap up with a few more questions and topics. But one of the last things I want to talk about, money. What is your relationship to money, and how do you view it in, growing your business and trying to be successful and all those things?
I love money. I think it allows me to do all the stuff that I've been doing. More money in the business means, we've started doing things. We now donate 1% of sales to micro-lending programs. And I wouldn't be doing that, if we didn't have money and we're growing the business. So on the flip side, there's never enough money when you're growing a startup. It's like, cash flow crunch every month is obviously stressful. I try to not let it stress myself out. It all seems to work itself out at some point, whether you have to cut back in one area to kind of make it through a month and cover something else, or it's constant balancing a budget at this stage and that cash flow crunch. But I think money, I'm motivated to make more money because I think you can do more good with more money. Everybody that's working with us right now, our employees, everybody's very passionate about, doing good and giving back. And the only way for us to really do that and to grow that is to make more money in the business as well. And obviously, I want to make more money to repay our investors who believed in me, and I want to be able to give that back to them out of principle.
Yeah, that's good. Paying back those who've lent you credit cards. So this has been a really inspiring talk for me, just, watching you grow and, get on shows and inspire a lot of people. And I'll definitely post links to all the, people, books, things you've mentioned in the show notes. But thank you, Jayla, for coming and sharing more of the Bonafere story in a new way. What is, in wrapping up, kind of what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So here in Santa Barbara, you can find Bonafere at Whole Foods, and then we also sell it online at bonafere.com. And you can email us through the website. And yeah, would love to. I love hearing from people and customers and questions and feedback. So,
your email address is
Jayla@bonafere.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. We are live streaming on Periscope. I've not been able to see the comments. I want to get a way for people can call in and maybe ask a question. I think that would be kind of cool. But this is the Joe Strandell Show. We have Jayla Siciliano, who has been sharing the story of Bon Affair. And we've had Joss, who has been so gracious to come and film. So thank you, Jayla, again.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, this is one thing I forgot, and then we'll kind of wrap up. But 3 truths that you know to be true, what would they be?
In business or life?
Life, business, what? Both?
3 truths. Well, I think that patience and persistence, which I talked about, is very true over and over in a lot of things. And then I think family, exercise, balance is, the second one. It's, to me, none of this is worth doing if I can't maintain my health and my relationships and my family. So I think that's absolutely critical, in my life. And then the third one, I think just surrounding yourself by good people. I think that's extremely important. And I think that's just something that applies to everything. And I think really, giving back and surrounding yourself by good people is super important.
Awesome. I definitely agree with those 3 things. Thank you again for coming and sharing. I definitely want to try some of this Bon Affair.
Yes, on your birthday.
It is
crack it open.
Birthday celebration. So thanks, guys, for tuning in today. Please subscribe on iTunes, and if this has inspired you, reach out to Jayla or leave a comment on iTunes. Reach out to me. There's a Facebook page called the Joe Strandell. Be sure to like it. There's also Bon Affair, which is on Facebook, and I'll link all that in the show notes. Thank you guys for tuning in today, and have a great week. Stay tuned for next week.